the government knows sponsors of this terrorism, of Boko Haram in Nigeria. Many of them are in government. Many of them are legislators. Many of them are governors, past governors.
We need to be careful the way we frame the situation in the country, because there's multidimensional, security issues is quite multidimensional. The issues there in the northeast or northwest might not be the same issue in north central, where we call middle belt. For instance, in the northeast, that's where we have the Boko Haram and the ISIS people operating. So that one, they do not care who you are. All they know is that anybody on their way or anybody that falls into their fulcrum must be a victim.
Hello and welcome to Channel Africa Conversations. I'm your host, Peter Ndoro. In this, the second part of a two-part conversation, we continue with our focus on the security situation in Nigeria, a country that has welcomed 100 US soldiers to train the West African nation's armed forces and assist with intelligence gathering in the fight against growing security threats from Islamist militants and other armed groups. Now, the move follows concerns raised by US President Donald Trump, who's accused Nigeria of failing to protect Christian communities from extremist violence. The deployment marks further escalation in military cooperation between Abuja and Washington, and this comes after recent US airstrikes on militant targets. The Nigerian government strongly disputes that the characterization of targeting of Christians, as insisting that the violence affects both Muslims and Christians as part of a broader security challenge. But in a country where Muslims make up an estimated 56.1% of the population and Christians 43.4%, is Nigeria's complex security crisis involving jihadist insurgencies, criminal banditry and communal clashes being oversimplified? Are claims that Christians are being systematically persecuted supported by the evidence? And is the US military intervention the right course of action? Well, in part one of this conversation, you would have heard from Reverend Dachomo, a pastor and a human rights advocate in Plateau State, describing the situation on the ground.
Like in Kwara, just last month, in Kwara State, when they attacked, a set came, and the Muslim to Muslim, they came with a different teaching, and the people said they were not going to collect that teaching. And when they discovered, they started shooting them. They killed over 100 people, and any Christian that was around, they kill him, and they burn houses in Kwara State. And in Plateau, once they stop you on the way, when the crisis, if you say you are a Muslim, they will say you make Kalma and Shahada. There's something that will say you should pronounce. If you didn't pronounce, they kill you. And this is what is happening, raping women in the bush, kidnapping. As I'm talking to you now, we want to see how to assist, because the kidnappers kidnapped Reverend and his wife, and he's in their custody today. And they are saying we have to look for how are we going to do that. Must present to them $50,000. And we managed to raise $14,000, but they reject it.
Well, to interrogate the issues beyond the headlines and the contrasting narratives shaping international response, we're joined today by Professor Christopher Isike, who is the director of the Africa Center for the Studies of the United States, University of Pretoria, as well as Chidi Omeje, who is the editor of Security Digest, as well as the Nigerian security analyst. Prof, thanks very much indeed for joining us, and welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Why has this become a diplomatic issue and now?
Well, look, I think that it's became a diplomatic issue now, essentially because of how the U.S. president chose to frame his interest and his intervention much more than what he had done, which has been largely welcomed by sections of Nigerians, considering the fact that indeed a lot of Christians have been killed by different Islamic groups in the country, and it's not just only about Boko Haram. And because a lot of people make the mistake of assuming that, well, it's Boko Haram. Boko Haram is also killing Muslims. That's correct. But the persecution and killing of Christians in Nigeria dates back to the 70s, right? And it has been going on without consequence, for decades. And it's a very intentional, very systematic killing of Christians, mainly in the northern part of the country. So that's a cause for concern that the government of Nigeria has really not responded to. But the way that Mr. Trump framed it and his intervention could have been better in terms of just simply framing it as U.S. support on humanitarian ground and based on the responsibility to protect doctrine to help the Nigerian state to deal with a problem that it has not been able to deal with for so many years now.
U.S. President Donald Trump is very transactional in the way that he approaches our continent, and so it'll be different things for different states. Is this more about domestic U.S. policy in that a major part of his base is conservative white Christians? Is this why he's flying this Christian flag? Because there are Christians all across the continent.
Yeah, there are Christians across the continent. So why is he interested in the Nigerian one? And this interest has got dated back to his first term as well. Is a mix of many of the factors you raised. Satisfying the domestic base, so trying to Christianize it. Is part of satisfying that base. But again, also, like you said, nothing goes for free for Mr. Trump. He's very transactional. So it's also about the resources that he feels that China is gaining an upper hand in Nigeria, having access to all of that as well, including critical minerals that Nigeria has in that part of the country. So it's a mix of a whole bunch of things, including security interests, but that's also fueled by the U.S. containment of China, attempt to contain China in the continent as well as the fact that Nigeria has also signaled interest to become part of BRICS. BRICS is something that the Trump administration does not look at favorably. It's one of the reasons I can tell you why South Africa has been targeted as a low-hanging fruit country, because of the question of de-dollarization that BRICS is engaging with. So any effort to try and get a footprint into countries that aspire to be BRICS members or are BRIC partners like Nigeria, it's an opportunity for them to try and get in there and control the narratives and foreign policy of that country to prevent it from towing the BRICS position, especially on de-dollarization.
Prof, the Nigerian authorities, they say that Christians are not being targeted specifically, but that all groups are vulnerable to extremists. Is that your take? Earlier on, you said that attacks on Christians have been commonplace since the 70s. So is the Nigerian government in denial?
Yes, they are. They're actually in denial, and beyond that, they're actually being dishonest. Because the fact that there's been killings of Muslims as well does not obviate or remove the fact that Christians have been killed, right? So two things can be true at the same time. You do not kill one truth because another truth exists in parallel. And so that should have been the attitude. So the question of genocide, if you look at the UN Convention on Genocide, there are 5 acts when committed with genocidal intent constitute genocide. One of them is the killing members of a group. In this case, would be Christians, causing serious bodily or mental harm that has happened to Christians, deliberately inflicting conditions of life, calculated to bring about physical destruction. We've seen that, even including killing of farmers in the middle belt of Nigeria, and then driving them from their homes and displacing them, and then taking over their lands. And even imposing measures intended to prevent births in the way they have treated little girls and children, and forcibly transferring children to another group. In terms of how they've kidnapped, these Muslim groups kidnapped Christian girls and taking them off to the Sambisa forest, and oftentimes marry them off, and they have never been seen again by their family. So all of these things are happening. And the fact that they are happening only in the northern part of the country, where that is dominated by Muslims, is a cause for concern, because the same thing does not happen to Muslims in the southern Christian part of the country. So now we talk about Boko Haram, doing all of these things. And of course, people have arguments that say that the killing of Muslims in this instance are done to Muslims who they feel are not real Muslims, according to them, Muslims who tend to support Christians. And the fact that before these Christians are killed, oftentimes there are Islamic chants that are made by these killers. So that gives it that religious slant, even though we want to say that there are other factors, and that is also correct, like communal clashes, kidnapping and criminality, general criminality, that's also intersect with some of these things. But there is the religious side of it that cannot be denied, and the government have failed to make this an issue for public policy, a public discussion for more than 50 years now, right? So it is that Trump tweets about the Christian genocide in Nigeria and his threat of intervening if nothing is done that got this issue to be on the national agenda, on the media public agenda in Nigeria for the first time in over 50 years. So should we, is there killings happening? The answer is yes. Is the government doing enough? The answer is no. Should it do enough? The answer is yes. And that's where the discussion should actually start.
All right. Perhaps as a final question to you, where is this going to end? Because the Americans are accusing Abuja of not protecting Christians. Abuja is saying, no, we are protecting everyone. If they take American help, are they not reinforcing the message in the first instance? And then why go to America for help when ECOWAS is there, supposedly also with a standby force that can assist, but that's not being deployed? Where is this going to end?
Well, so that's part of the contradiction of the government that says, oh, nothing is happening, it's under control, but we need your help. Your help to do what, right? The US have not gone into Nigeria like they went into Venezuela without the cooperation of the government. The government has welcomed them and is working with them, providing intelligence for the bombings that the US have done. So that's part of the dishonesty of the Nigerian government in dealing with this. And one of the reasons why I said earlier on that the government is dishonest is the fact that the government knows sponsors of this terrorism, of Boko Haram in Nigeria. Many of them are in government. Many of them are legislators. Many of them are governors, past governors. This information are out there for people to see. The government knows that. So if the government is really serious, it can prosecute these people, arrest and prosecute these bandits and killers, these terrorists. But it is not doing all of this for political reasons, sometimes as simple as just to get votes from the northern part of the country, right? And so if you have a government that knows what it needs to do, but is refusing to do that for political reasons, a government that is infiltrated, a military that is also infiltrated by these terrorist groups and interests, it becomes difficult for that government to be trusted by even its neighbors. So the idea of an ECOWAS force does not apply here, because many of the countries will not trust that those they are working with are not actually part of those that they should be working against. So that's part of the problem. If the Nigerian government is serious, it has if it has the political will, it can solve this problem all by itself without much help from the US. Of course, there are issues of capability in terms of weaponry. So there's a legitimacy in saying that they are not capable. But I think that the bigger problem is the lack of will, the lack of political will to deal with these problems, because there are other areas where they can get the weapons from if they are not being infiltrated by the terrorists in the military, in the intelligence, and in the government itself. So I think that the real solution would be when the government decides that, okay, we do not want our sovereignty impinged on further, not just by the US, but also by these terrorist groups. Because I've heard a lot of talk about how the US is, infringing on the sovereignty of Nigeria. However, sovereignty is also linked to legitimacy and acceptance. If the government is not able to protect the lives of its citizens, such that external actors like ISWAP and other terrorist groups can come from outside the country to abduct and take over police stations, military formations, and even local government, the sovereignty has already been infringed on by the terrorists in the first place. There was no talk about the sovereignty question then. So now you have a state actor coming in to help invited by the Nigerian government, and suddenly we bring in this sovereignty question. So if the Nigerian government is concerned really about the sovereignty concerns, what it should do is to clean house and begin to do what it's supposed to do in fishing out those who sponsor these groups, and many of them are rich people in Nigeria, influential people in Nigeria, fish them out, prosecute them, put them in jail, and then begin to use this intelligence and the military force to deal with those problems. Of course, the ultimate solution would be for the Nigerian state to rethink and repurpose its essence to serve the people, for the government to govern better in the interest of the people, to deliver on services of democracy, dividends for the people, both of northern Nigeria and southern Nigeria. And if that happens, then the vulnerability to terrorist attraction would be much, much less, and people would be, part of their own security architecture. So that's my solution in the long term. But in the immediate short term is for the government to clean house and begin to do what is right.
Professor Ike, it sounds so simple when you say it like that, but as we know, once politicians get involved, things can get very complicated indeed. Thank you so much indeed for joining us on Channel Africa Conversations. Your insights are being greatly appreciated.
Thank you for having me.
That was Professor Christopher Afoke Isike, who's a Professor of African Politics and International Relations at the Department of Political Sciences at the University of Pretoria, and also Director of the African Center for the Study of United States, University of Pretoria, South Africa. You're still watching Channel Africa Conversations, and today we're exploring the security situation in Nigeria with the arrival of 100 US soldiers to train the military there and assist them ostensibly with their fight against the threat against Christians in the country. And to help us with this conversation a little bit further, I'm now joined by Chidi Omeje, who's an editor of the Security Digest and is also a Nigerian security analyst. Chidi, always good to talk to you. Thanks so much indeed for joining us.
It's my pleasure to speak with you this Ash Wednesday morning.
So what's your take on this story that Nigerian Christians in particular are under threat and are being persecuted? The Americans are convinced that the government is not protecting Christians. The government is saying that it's not just Christians, But some people are telling us that actually attacks on Christians have been commonplace as far back as the 70s. How do you understand the situation?
I was going to say that the framing that Christians are specifically under attack may not be entirely right. It depends on where the attack happened. If it happens in the, let's say, in the Middle Belt, where you have predominantly Christian, population, definitely you see that Christians will be most affected, especially when it happens in Plateau State or Benue State, where you have these, headers and farmers always coming into, coming to clash. Not really clash, but because most times the farmers will be invaded by these Fulani people who herd the cattle. So in such situation, the casualty, the victims will be Christians. Then of course we move up north to maybe what we call northwest, where you have Katsina, Zamfara, Sokoto, all those places. Definitely the attacks there, the victims will be Muslims because it's predominantly Muslim. So we need to be careful the way we frame the situation in the country, because there's multidimensional, security issues is quite multidimensional. The issues there in the northeast or northwest might not be the same issue in north central, where we call middle belt. For instance, in the northeast, that's where we have the Boko Haram and the ISIS people operating. So that one, they do not care who you are. All they know is that anybody on their way or anybody that falls into their fulcrum must be a victim. So for me, the framing that Christians have been specifically targeted cannot be entirely true, especially when you look at the broader security challenges in the country. But specifically, if you go to areas like Plateau or Benue, like I mentioned earlier on, you discover that all the attacks there, the victims would naturally be Christian because it's Christian-dominated areas. So for me, if we want to do a proper mapping of the security issue in the country, it would be completely wrong to assume that the entire attacks are targeted at Christians alone, because I know for sure, I've been to most of the epicenters of this crisis, and I know that the victims are not just Christians. But indeed, like I said, it depends on where the attacks have been carried out. If it's carried out in Middle Belt, where we have more Christians will be victims. That's what I think.
So, as you've mentioned, I mean, Nigeria seems to be under multiple and different types of security threats: jihadists, insurgencies, banditry,
Absolutely.
land and grazing disputes, criminal networks even. So then the question then becomes, are the authorities able to deal with all these different type of threats coming in different guises?
That's just the challenge. That's the natural question anybody want to ask. Let me tell you, not just this particular government, but the succeeding governments before, a number of government administrations dating back almost a decade and a half. Any of the government that comes in, the issue has always been having the political will to deal with the situation, to deal with the root causes. But we've not been able to see any of these guys taking, dealing with issues and then, dealing with the root causes. Most of the things are always been, dealing with the symptoms, and if you deal with the symptoms, the disease persists. And we have, like, I conducted what we call root cause analysis on some of these security challenges, and of course, at the heart of these challenges have always been issues of bad governance that bring about corruption that bring about poverty that breeds irritability, that makes people to find crime and criminality as an option of life. So most of these issues have not been dealt with. So back to your question, the country is finding it very difficult to deal with the issues because, like mentioned earlier on, they are multifaceted, and each of these security challenges have their fundamental root causes. And so if you're not able to deal with them at the root level, and for you to deal with them at the root level, you have to have that political will. And this is what has been lacking. So giving rise to this situation where Americans will now think that they can come in, because it does appear that the government have proved incapable of dealing with the situations. People are dying on a daily basis, people are being kidnapped on a daily basis, a number of communities have been sacked. So things are just awry. And it's very clear that the military are completely, overstretched. But like I always say, thankfully they're not yet overwhelmed. They're overstretched because the military will only be called upon to deal with any security challenges, from terrorism in the northeast, insurgency in the northwest, industrial level kidnapping, banditry, attack on our maritime assets, secession agenda in the south. All these are various violent security challenges that needed to be dealt with, and it's just the Nigerian military that are doing most of the jobs. The police have not really keyed into the job, and then of course we're not afraid that we have our intelligence assets that are helping out. But what I'm saying is that that security architecture that give us effective way of dealing with the situation have not been employed. We only employ the military guys, deploy them to every situation, and of course you know that they don't have that numerical strength to cover the entire length and breadth of Nigeria where security challenges are selling. So that's the issue.
Nigeria has always had a strong military force, and no doubt over time have been, have had a significant presence. I mean, for goodness sake, they were in Benin recently to assist there militarily. So my question then becomes, can the Americans actually make a difference in terms of training? Because that's what they're there to do. Is this going to help them with the myriad of problems that the country faces?
Well, don't forget that these emerging security challenges are not exactly the issues that we confronted that the military are known to deal with. This is purely asymmetrical warfare, and I think Americans have had experience. That more reason why they are they're coming to they're partnering with us now will be very helpful, because they're going to share experience. So yes, Nigerian military always want to have that kind of opening, trying to increase their capacity to deal with these very, very strange security challenges that are confronting us. Because but the very clear thing to note is that the Nigerian military are as strong as you know them. The issue has always been that they are almost overwhelmed with the situation. I just mentioned to you now that every region of the country has its own peculiar security challenges, and these security challenges are formidable, requiring the military to deal with. I don't know if you have idea how massive the country is. You don't know how how many people dwell in this country. Talking about 250 million people, intelligent people, are very active and plural, and of course, you have people in that measure who are equally bringing the challenges. So it's difficult for the military to deal with, because the military is essentially overwhelmed. So now the Americans will be very helpful. I mean, what we're told was that they are coming to assist our military in terms of probably equipment handling, intelligence, all manner of things, but essentially to assist our troops to build the capacity. So that is welcome. So I think that it will help. What Nigerians really want is to see the end of all this traumatic experience, across regions. So back to the question, yeah, Americans will be helpful, even though most people don't want the boots on the ground. We don't want them here to actually have a boot on the ground in the country. It is good that they are just here for training sake, for intelligence efforts, or whatever it is, but not to have American boots on ground.
That was what my next question was going to be, actually, what it does for public confidence when your national army is calling in people from outside to come and train them to deal with Nigerian problems.
No, that to me that would be quite a very wrong framing. They're not coming to train. Nigerian military is well experienced. They've dealt with challenges in Liberia, in Sierra Leone. Of course, you mentioned Benin. So they're just coming for a specialized part of these challenges, which I think Americans have a better or bigger experience in. So it's not as if they're coming to train Nigerians all over again in terms of soldiering work and everything. But because they're actually just coming to deal with, to help us build capacities in areas that Nigerians think they lack.
Chidi, perhaps as a final question, I make you Minister of Defense or Special Advisor to the Minister of Defense. What are the things that the country has to do in the short term and maybe the medium term to fix these security challenges?
We need to have a government that has that testicular fortitude, that had a political will to take decisions, far-reaching decisions in terms of uncovering the finances of these people, in terms of dealing with the situation without looking back. Of course, secondly, we need to identify capable countries that have that capability to assist us in different areas of these challenges. For instance, we have terrorism, we have banditry, we have attack on our maritime asset. So we need different partnerships that can deal specifically with all this. And of course, we must increase our our capacity in terms of numerical strength of our armed forces. They need to increase the boot on the ground and put more eyes on the sky and still in the water. This all means that we must put our money where our mouth is. We must invest in dealing with these security challenges, because without security, there will be no development. So I am looking forward to seeing a government that will see security challenges as an emergency and deal with it like an emergency and put money into it and make sure that we deal with it once and for all. Leveraging partnerships, leveraging technology, leveraging, and of course, having strong political will to take up these decisions. I believe that it's not surmountable.
Thanks there to Chidi Elmeje, who is the editor of the Defense magazine, Defense publication, is also a security analyst, giving us his take on the situation in Nigeria when it comes to security. And one's starting to get the sense that beyond capability and resources, perhaps political will is also at play in dealing with some of the challenges that Nigeria is facing. And that's how we come to the end of today's edition of Channel Africa Conversations, looking at the situation in Nigeria. And just a reminder, this was part 2 of the conversation. There was a part 1 where we spoke to Reverend Dachomo in Plateau State. And that is a part you really do have to watch, because you get a real feeling of what it's like on the ground that Christians are experiencing at this time. So please watch part 1 as well of this conversation. And also, we invite you please to comment on what you've just heard and seen, and you can do that in the comment section below. Or else you can send us your thoughts via email. It's on your screen now. And also engage with us on our other social media platforms. We'd love to hear what your thoughts are in terms of who you want us to have conversations with and what about. We look forward to hearing from you. In the meantime, from me and the team, thanks so much indeed for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.